My name is Renata Voss. I am 34 years old. I do medical billing for a cardiology group in Columbus, Ohio. And right now, I am sitting in the parking lot of a Panera Bread on Morse Road because I just got off the phone with my mother for the first time in 6 years. And I cannot make my hands stop shaking long enough to put the car in drive. She called from a different number. I almost let it go to voicemail. I almost drove away from this whole thing one more time the way I have been driving away from it for 6 years, quietly, cleanly, without looking back. But I picked up. And she said 4 words before I could hang up. She said, "Renata, he's in trouble. He, not your brother, not Marcus, just he." Like even now, even after everything, she cannot say his name to me without it sounding like an apology she has been rehearsing for years, and still cannot get right. There are certain silences that live inside your chest long after your ears have moved on. For me, it is the sound of a door not slamming but clicking shut. Very softly, very deliberately. The kind of quiet that means someone made a choice. I have been sitting in this parking lot for 11 minutes. The coffee I bought inside is still in the cup holder. I have not touched it. I already know what her call means, and I already know what I am going to do about it. And I think I knew it the moment I heard her voice. The part I am still working out is why it took 6 years for the world to catch up to what I saw in one afternoon. Are you somewhere quiet right now, wherever you are? Because I have been telling pieces of this story for years, to therapists and to one friend who really listened, and I have never said the whole thing out loud in order. I think I am finally ready to. My mother's name is Carolyn Voss, and she taught 7th grade English in Westerville, Ohio for 23 years. Which meant she spent her professional life correcting other people's mistakes and never once applied that same precision to anything inside our house. She had a red pen habit that went home with her. When I was 11, she edited a card I made her for Mother's Day, not the envelope, the card. She handed it back with 3 corrections circled in red and said, "You've got your mother's grammar, thank God not your father's." My father, Gerald, sold commercial HVAC equipment and was gone 3 weeks out of every 4. When he was home, he laughed too loud at his own jokes and watched the History Channel until 2 in the morning and made everyone in the house feel like we were guests at a bed and breakfast where the owner was trying a little too hard. He was not cruel, he was just never quite present enough to notice anything that mattered. Then there was Marcus. My brother Marcus, 20 months older than me, built like our father but with our mother's sharpness. The one who could make a room go quiet with a single look, and then make everyone laugh 30 seconds later. Marcus who could talk his way into or out of anything and knew it. Marcus who was, for most of my childhood, genuinely my favorite person in the world. He was funny in the way that felt like a gift. Not performed funny, not trying to be liked funny, but the kind where he would say something completely flat and specific and true, and you would laugh for 10 seconds before you even understood why. We used to watch bad reality television together on Sunday nights, and he would run commentary the whole time, and I would laugh until my face hurt. He was protective when it counted. When I was 16 and a boy at school would not stop following me between classes, Marcus found him at lunch and said something I never heard, and the boy avoided me completely after that. I loved him for that for a long time. I want to say that clearly before I say anything else. I loved him, and that is exactly what made what happened feel like something breaking inside my chest that never quite reset correctly. The first warning sign I did not read correctly was about money. Marcus always needed a little more than he had, but he made it charming. He would borrow $20 and bring back 30 the next week. He borrowed my car for a weekend when I was 20 and put $70 of gas in it when he returned it. He made borrowing feel like abundance. I did not understand until much later that this was a technique, not a personality. The second warning sign was the way he talked about people who had more than him. Not bitterness, exactly. More like a studied interest, like he was taking notes. He would ask detailed questions about how someone got a particular job or how they structured a particular business deal, and you would think he was genuinely curious, genuinely supportive. Until you noticed, he only asked those questions about people he knew personally. People whose success was close enough to touch. The trigger was my grandmother dying. Nana Ruth, my mother's mother, a tiny sharp woman who smelled like oil of olive and kept every letter anyone ever sent her in shoeboxes under her bed. She died when I was 27 and she left me money, not a fortune, $62,000. But $62,000 when you are 27 and doing data entry for a property management company and living in a one-bedroom in Clintonville means everything. It means options. It means the feeling of the floor becoming solid under your feet for the first time. Nana Ruth had told me about it 2 years before she died. We were sitting on her porch in Zanesville with sweet tea, and she said, "I'm leaving you something. Not your mother, not Marcus, you. Don't let anyone tell you how to spend it. You'll know." She squeezed my hand and went back to watching the neighborhood. I did not tell anyone, not even Marcus. I should have known from the fact that I instinctively kept it from him that some part of me had already understood what he was. The will was read on a Tuesday in October. Gray sky, oak leaves coming down in sheets outside the attorney's office window. The smell of that specific carpet cleaner that law offices all seem to use like it is a requirement. My mother sat rigid with her hands folded. Marcus sat with his ankle crossed over his knee like he was waiting for a bus. I sat between them and thought about nothing except wanting it to be over. When the attorney read my name and the amount, I felt my mother go very still next to me, not surprised, still, like something she had been expecting had arrived. Marcus turned and looked at me. Just looked. His expression was completely neutral, and I smiled at him, small and a little uncertain, and he nodded once and looked back at the window. I told myself that nod meant he was fine. I told myself that for 2 weeks. The calls started the following Saturday. Marcus called and said he was in a rough patch. He had a business idea, a real one this time, a food truck that he had been planning for 8 months. And he just needed seed money to lock in the commissary kitchen lease, because the deal was expiring. He needed $8,000. He would pay me back in 6 months with interest, and he already had 2 investors lined up. He just needed the anchor. I wouldn't ask if I had anywhere else to turn, he said. You know that. I said I needed to think about it. He called again 3 days later. This time the tone was different, not urgent exactly. Colder, he said, "Look, I know Nana left you that money, and I'm happy for you. But I want you to think about the fact that she was my grandmother too. And she never once offered to do the same for me." "That was her choice," I said. "Was it, or did you say something to her?" I felt my face go hot. "I never said anything to her about you. Renata." He used my name the way my mother used a red pen. "Corrective. You were always her favorite, you know that, you worked it. And now I'm asking you for one thing." I did not say anything. 8,000, he said. "That's what I need, after everything I've done for you." I transferred him the money 4 days later. I transferred it because I was 27, and he was my brother. And I still believed that the boy who had scared off the kid following me between classes was the real Marcus, and this other version was temporary stress. I was wrong in a way that took me 2 more years to fully see. He came back for more money 3 months later. 11,000 this time. The food truck lease had fallen through because of a zoning issue, but he had found a better opportunity, a wholesale import business, home goods and kitchenware from a contact in Portugal. And he had done the numbers, and the margins were extraordinary. He needed 11,000 for the initial inventory purchase and container shipping deposit. I said no. And that is when I found out who my mother had been in this story the entire time. She called me that same evening. Her voice was careful and measured the way it got when she was managing me, not talking to me. She said Marcus had called her. She said he was struggling, and I was the only one in a position to help, and she thought I should think carefully about what family means when things get hard. "He borrowed $8,000 from me 3 months ago," I said. "He has not mentioned repayment once." "He's building something," she said. "You have to give people time." "Mom, he hasn't even started yet." "Renata," red pen voice, "I want you to listen to me. You have $62,000 that your grandmother left you. Your brother has nothing, and you are seriously telling me you cannot share. I gave him 8,000. You have 54,000 left. She said it like that, bluntly. Like she had done the subtraction herself and kept the number ready. I told Marcus no, I said. Then I am telling you yes, she said. And I want you to think about what it means, that the one time in your brother's life, he needs something real. You are going to be the person who said no. I sat in my apartment with the phone against my ear and the television off and the room very dark because I had not turned any lights on, and I thought. She knew. She knew about the money before the will was even read. Not the amount, maybe, but she knew I had been singled out and she had been waiting. Both of them had been waiting. And the 8,000 I had already given was not a test I passed. It was confirmation that I would give more if the pressure was right. I told Marcus no, I said again. And I am telling you no. She was quiet for 4 seconds. Then she said, I told your father you'd end up like this. Selfish, closed off. We did something wrong with you somewhere. I set the phone down on my kitchen counter. Not dramatically. Not even angry yet, not really. Just very precisely done with the conversation. I sat on the floor with my back against the kitchen cabinets, and the linoleum cold through my jeans, and I counted the ceiling tiles in the hallway where the overhead light was still on from when I came home. 14 tiles. I counted them 3 times. I did not cry. I think I was too clear to cry. Some moments are too transparent for tears. You see everything too cleanly, and the clarity itself holds you upright. That was the last conversation I had with my mother for 6 years. What happened next was not what I planned. It was better. Here is what I did not do. I did not respond to Marcus's texts. There were 11 of them over the following 2 weeks, ranging from conciliatory to guilt-deploying to one that just said, okay then, like a door closing, which I thought was rich, given everything. I did not answer my mother's 2 voicemails. I blocked their numbers after the second one, not because I was fragile but because I was busy. I was busy figuring out what $62,000 was actually for. The Monday after that phone call I drove to a bookstore on High Street and bought 4 books. One on starting a small business, one on personal finance basics, one on medical coding certification, and one novel just to remind myself that not everything had to be useful. I sat in that bookstore for 2 hours with a green tea from the cafe at the front, and I read the first chapter of all 4 books, and I felt something shift very quietly in my chest. Not healed. Not even better, just pointed in a direction. A woman named Deandra worked at the property management company with me, 2 desks over, and she had been doing medical billing certification classes on weeknights for 8 months. I had heard her talk about it but never really listened. That week, I asked her about it properly. She was the kind of person who explained things without making you feel stupid for not already knowing them, which is a rarer quality than it should be. She had short natural hair, and she always had a tumbler of something hot at her desk, and she laughed at things quickly and genuinely. She said, it's not glamorous but it's stable and you can do it from anywhere, and nobody can take it from you once you have it. That last part. Nobody can take it from you once you have it. I enrolled in the certification program the following week. I used $900 of Nana Ruth's money. It was the best $900 I have ever spent. The first 6 months were genuinely hard. I was working 40 hours a week and studying 12 hours on weekends, and my social life collapsed into nothing. Which in retrospect was less of a sacrifice than it sounds, because most of my social life had been built around family events that I was no longer attending. I failed the first practice exam with a 61. I passed the real exam on my second attempt with an 88. I stood in the parking lot of the testing center on a cold March afternoon and called Deandra, and she screamed so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. What I had to unlearn took longer than the certification. I had been raised to believe that loyalty meant never fully closing a door. That family was entitled to a version of you that forgave before it was asked to. That saying no was a character defect, instead of a complete sentence. Unlearning that was not a single moment. It was a slow renovation, pulling out one bad piece of framing at a time, and discovering that the house stood better without it. I applied for a billing coordinator position at a cardiology group on Sawmill Road when I was 29. I did not get it. I applied again 14 months later at a different practice and got an interview but not the role. I applied a third time at 31 to the group I work for now, and the woman who interviewed me, a practice manager named Felicia with a no-nonsense manner and excellent reading glasses, said, "You have been trying for this specific role for a while." I said yes. She said, "Why?" I said, "Because I am good at it, and I know I will get better, and I am not going to stop until someone lets me prove that." She hired me 3 days later. I will not pretend there were not bad nights. There were bad nights. There was a Sunday in my second year of working the billing job when I was sitting alone in my apartment, eating takeout pad thai, and I thought about Nana Ruth's porch and the sweet tea, and I felt the grief of it move through me like something slow and physical. Not for the money, not even for Marcus exactly, but for the version of the story that could have existed if they had just been different people. If they had been capable of meaning what they looked like they meant. I sat with that grief for about 40 minutes, then I washed my fork and went to bed. By the time I was 32, I had paid off my car, built a savings account that would have made 27-year-old me physically dizzy, and started doing pro bono billing, consulting for a small free clinic on the east side that Deandra had told me about. I was not famous, I was not rich, but I had built something out of what they tried to take, which turned out to be the most important thing Nana Ruth left me. Not the money itself, but the decision about what to do with it when the people who wanted it showed you exactly what they were. The quiet moment I knew I had made, it was not a promotion or a number in a bank account. It was a Saturday morning when I woke up before my alarm and lay in bed and heard my own breathing in the quiet and thought about my day, what I wanted to do with it, and realized there was not a single item on the list that had anything to do with anyone else's opinion of me. That was it, that was the whole thing. And then the phone rang from a number I did not recognize, and it was my mother's voice, and she said, "Renata. He's in trouble." Marcus had been running something for 4 years that finally caught up with him. I found this out not from my mother, but from a mutual friend named Tessa who had stayed loosely connected to both sides of my life, and who texted me 2 days after my mother's call with a level of detail my mother never would have offered. Marcus had been operating a side business since he was 30 that involved buying distressed e-commerce inventory and reselling it. Which sounds legitimate until you understand that a portion of the inventory he was acquiring had unclear provenance, and several of his suppliers had turned out to be moving goods that were not theirs to move. Marcus had not been the primary actor in any of this. He had been careful in exactly the way that told you he understood he needed to be careful. But the investigation had pulled him in as a knowing participant, and the question was now whether he could demonstrate he had not known. He had not, as far as I could tell, paid a single person back from any of the loans he had accumulated over the years. He had borrowed from friends, from Tessa herself, from an uncle on my father's side, from 2 former colleagues, from at least one person he had met at a networking event who thought they were making an investment. The total was somewhere above $90,000 by Tessa's estimation. He had called my mother because he needed money for a lawyer. My mother had called me because she had no one else left to call. I sat with this information for 3 days. I went to work. I ate dinner. I went to the free clinic on Thursday and worked through a billing backlog with a volunteer named Sujin, who always brought homemade rice crackers to share, and who once told me that the greatest luxury she knew was doing good work for its own sake. I thought about that a lot during those 3 days. Good work for its own sake, what I owed the world, what I did not owe it. On Saturday morning, I called my mother back. She answered on the second ring. She sounded older. Not fragile exactly, just closer to the ground, the way some voices get when the years have cost them something they cannot get back. "Thank you for calling," she said. "Tell me what you need," I said. She explained it. Marcus had a consultation with a defense attorney on Monday. The retainer was 15,000. She had 9,000 in savings. She needed the remaining 6,000, and she was asking me because there was nowhere else to ask. I let her finish. Then I said, "How much did he pay back to me from the 8,000? Silence. "Mom, how much?" "He had a hard stretch, Renata, the business." "Nothing," I said. "He paid back nothing. In 7 years. He's your brother. He borrowed money from at least 9 people that I know of. He's been doing this since before he borrowed from me. He made mistakes. He made a practice," I said. "There's a difference. And I think you know it. I know that he is going to lose everything if someone does not help him. I know that too. Then how can you sit there and say no?" I thought about the linoleum floor. I thought about 14 ceiling tiles. I thought about a Sunday in my apartment with pad thai and grief that lasted 40 minutes and then was done. "Because I watched you add up what I had left," I said. "I watched you do the subtraction and tell me the number like you had been keeping it in your head. And I understood what that meant about what I was to you. Not your daughter, an account." She was quiet. "Marcus has never once asked me how I am, not in the years before the money and not after. He called Nana Ruth's death a transaction, and you called me selfish for declining to participate in it. Renata, this is his life." "I know," I said. "His life that he built. You cannot borrow your way into a life and then ask the people you borrowed from to pay for the consequences." Another silence. Longer. "So you're not going to help him?" "I'm not going to give him money," I said. "No, then what are you calling for?" And this is the part I had thought about for 3 days, what I was calling for. "I'm calling because you're my mother and you called me, and I wanted to say this clearly one time so you have heard it. I do not hate you. I do not hate Marcus. I spent a long time being angry, and I spent a long time being sad. And I spent a long time working through what happened in that kitchen with the phone on the counter. And I came out the other side of all of it. I wanted you to know that because I think you've been imagining a version of me that is still sitting on that floor." She said, very quietly. "Are you not?" "No," I said. "Then what are you?" "Finished," I said. "I've been finished for a while. I just wanted you to know that firsthand." She made a sound, not a word. Just a small, compressed sound that I had heard from her exactly once before, at her own mother's funeral. And I understood that it was the sound of someone who has just understood that a thing they were hoping was still salvageable is not. That it has already been resolved, that they are not being invited to the resolution. "I hope Marcus gets the help he needs," I said. "I mean that genuinely. I hope he finds a lawyer, and I hope the investigation goes the way it needs to go, and I hope, when this is over, he does something different with whatever is left. I do, but not from you. Not from me." She did not say anything else for a long moment. Then she said, "I don't know how to talk to you." And I said, "I know. That's what I'm saying." I let that sit for a moment. Then, "I told you no once. And you told me I was selfish and closed off and that something had gone wrong with me. I want you to know that I spent years thinking maybe you were right. And then I spent years building a life to prove you weren't. And then I spent a morning just living it without thinking about either of you. That's the one I'm keeping." She did not have an answer for that. I did not expect one. We said goodbye politely. I hung up. I sat in my kitchen, at the table this time, with both hands wrapped around my coffee mug and the morning light coming through the window above the sink. The coffee was still warm. I had turned the lights on myself. I drove back past the Panera on Morse Road later that week, not stopping, just passing it on my way to the clinic. The parking lot looked exactly the way it always looks. Ordinary, a little too bright, a few cars scattered. Nothing remarkable, just asphalt and painted lines and a cloudy sky. Marcus hired a lawyer. Not from my money. I read later through Tessa that my mother had taken a loan against her car and made up the difference herself. The case is still in its early stages, and I genuinely do not know how it will resolve, and I have realized that I do not need to know. It is his case, his life, his accounting. What I know is what I have. Deandra and I still have lunch every 2 weeks. And she just got her master's, and I took her out for dinner to celebrate at a Peruvian place on 5th Avenue that she had been wanting to try for a year. Felicia at the practice promoted me to senior coordinator 8 months ago, which came with a title and a raise, and an office I share with no one. The free clinic got a grant from a local foundation and is expanding into a second space, and I have been helping Sujin build out the billing infrastructure for the new location. It is not glamorous work, it is exacting and repetitive, and it matters. My apartment has plants now. I am not entirely sure when the plants happened. I think it was a Tuesday. Nana Ruth's $62,000 did not buy me a food truck or a container of goods from Portugal or a business that existed mostly in the telling. It bought me a certification and a direction and 9 months of patience and a few bad practice exams, and one past real one and a life made of actual things instead of borrowed stories. My mother told me something had gone wrong with me. It turned out she was right, just not in the way she meant. What went wrong with me was that I finally stopped adding up what was left. The hardest thing about becoming a person your family does not recognize is that you have to spend a while not recognizing yourself either. The self you become after that is quieter, more deliberate. Built to last instead of built to please. I am 34 years old and I live in Columbus, Ohio, and I sat in a parking lot 11 days ago and waited for my hands to stop shaking, and then I drove home and made dinner. The missed calls I spent 6 years dreading turned out to be the last thing they had to take from me. Funny how the things you fear the longest always seem smaller in person.